Welcome to Season 2 of the Pivot Point podcast. This season, we are featuring candid conversations. We're interviewing industry experts and leaders about candid conversations they've had that involve gender in some way. They're going to fill us in on what happened, what prevented them from addressing it, the risks they took in that conversation, why they chose to say something and how they handled it, and what happened next. Stay tuned for Pivotal Stories, a Positive Change. In the studio, we have Vernon Johnson, who is an up-and-coming public health and youth development professional. He developed his bachelor's degree in healthcare management from Southern Illinois University in 2009. He also received his master's in public health with an emphasis in community health education from Southern Illinois University in 2011. He hails from Flossmoor, Illinois, and currently lives in Chicago. His specialties and interests include youth management, diverse and inclusive methodologies in employment and program development, environmental justice, community health, decreasing health disparities within marginalized groups, volunteering, poetry, art, and a wide spectrum of music. Vern has had the esteemed pleasure in previously working for the Illinois Caucus for Adolescent as a youth development coordinator, a youth initiatives coordinator, and a youth coach at Employment and Employer Services, Inc., and currently serves as the Diversity and Inclusion Academic Relations Specialist at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, where he is charged with coordinating an enterprise-wide STEM program for young people. Vern refers to himself as an interdependent ally and seeks to have an everlasting effect on the community he serves. Ooh, I love that. Interdependent ally. We'll have to dig into that one. Well, welcome, Vern. Thanks for being on.
Thank you, Julie, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, as we do with all of our guests this season, we ask for a candid conversation. And I'm sure based on your background, you do not have a shortage of these. But if you had to pick or talk to, conversations you've had around equality, especially involving gender, what would you like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, equality is something that has always been something I've been an advocate for, and something that I feel is important to make sure that it's being implemented in every sense. And gender equality has definitely been a part of that conversation. And in my first role with ICA, Illinois Caucus for Adolescent Health, I was actually the only male or male-identified individual on that team in that entire organization. And it was a great learning moment for me because I was fresh off of getting my master's and really, had a wide array of different skills and different things that I've done and interests as well. So youth development, public health, healthcare management, making sure that, young people are always a part of the conversation, as well as making sure that diversity and inclusion was always a part of the conversation as well. I always looked at diversity and inclusion as just something I always just wanted to be and encompass and to make sure it was a part of the environment I was in. I think back then I didn't know exactly what that was called, but I just wanted everyone to feel equal in a sense. And so going back to gender equality in that sense, I definitely learned a lot about a lot of the things that especially women go through, whether that's through employment, whether that's through seeking different services, because I worked with a lot of young women and pregnant and parenting youth as well. And I just learned that there were so many different, socially placed obstacles, so many different laws and regulations set in place for women to not, feel that they can bring their authentic selves each day, even into their lives, not even to work or to school or anything like that. And so I learned a lot in that aspect, and it really did help to propel me in the direction of diversity and inclusion.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting that you say being the only man in that youth environment. That's different, right? I find with women, they'll say, "Well, it's very male dominated. I'm the only woman in a lot of meetings, or maybe even the only woman on the team." So it's kind of an interesting
Hmm.
vantage point that you had early in your career as being the only one, which the research shows on that we tend to cover when we're the only one as a part of a group, kind of show a different side of ourselves. Like you said, maybe not be our full authentic selves. So I'm curious, what did that feel like to be the only one?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really think too much of it at the time.
Sure.
I always, you know, uh, worked well with everyone, whether you identified as male or female, and really, really just enjoyed, people for who they are.
Hmm.
I always thought of people as like spirits and their essence, and that's what I really wanted to connect with. All the other kind of phenotypical features of folks, I didn't want to look just at that because
Sure.
as a a black man, and coming up, I've experienced my own discriminatory
Sure.
behaviors towards me in my own sense, I had empathy within that, and so I said to myself, I didn't want to impose or to make anyone else feel that they were, how I felt in those moments. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of why I keep or coined that term of interdependent ally, because
Mm.
I feel like the struggles and things that other people may be experiencing, I want to aid in distilling that and be an ally with you in combating that
Hmm.
discrimination. And so definitely, it was something that I did. I realized and felt, but I also felt it was a great opportunity as well, being the only male on that staff, because one thing that I was able to do was actually galvanize other male allies in the
Mm.
reproductive justice efforts that we were focusing in on, and youth advocate roles as well. And so I actually started a male, a all kind of male identified group where
Hmm.
we got together on a quarterly basis and talked about how we could combat, gender violence.
Mm.
How can we combat hypermasculinity that we're seeing in the media, and utilize that kind of form as a way to create these advocates and go off in the community and spread
Mm.
that even more.
Love that.
So it was definitely a great experience.
Yeah, I recently watched the Mask You Live In, that documentary about
Hmm.
hypermasculinity. If you haven't seen it
Mm-hmm.
yet, it's exactly what you're describing. The media images, the things we teach young boys from a very young age. Here I am working with women. I'm like, oh my gosh, these boys, So it's nice that you created this kind of male group to galvanize more allies, but also deal with
Yeah.
the barriers. The barriers, I think, to being empathetic and vulnerable that often our allies are,
Mm-hmm.
there are masculine barriers. Those behaviors are not consistent with our societal ideal of masculinity. And so it's creating a safe place for men to have conversations and to be able to express emotion without, a retaliation to, oh, be a man, man up. And
Exactly.
we find in our research that's absolutely key to gender bias.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add real quickly too that hypermasculinity is not only dangerous and toxic for male identified individuals, but it's just as dangerous and toxic for female identified individuals as well, especially those female identified individuals that look at hypermasculinity as the means of being a man,
Mm.
or the means of identifying with a male. And so it's a toxic function of what perceived masculinity is just in itself.
Yeah, so well said. It doesn't do anyone any good to conform or feel like they have to conform or want those gender boxed norms. There's so much fluidity between them, that I find is absolutely pivotal for women to take their careers to the next level and for men to also feel safe stepping into this conversation. So Excellent. Well, Vern, fast forward to today, you're leading diversity and inclusion efforts within a large organization, doing a lot of education on the topic. I'm curious, for other D&I professionals out there, and when I'm working with them, I hear things like, "Man, it's lonely." If I get invited to a meeting, people think I'm the diversity police, and they're going to get in trouble for saying the wrong thing, or I'm going to have to employ certain standards, rules, goals that I have to impose on the organization and kind of force diversity. Whereas I know that's absolutely not the goal. Help me understand from your vantage point, what are the goals for diversity and inclusion in where you stand today? What are you driving change for at your organization?
Definitely. Diversity and inclusion is so important to organizations. And sometimes you just hear diversity or just inclusion, but it's important to have both aspects because both of those aspects are different yet integral at the same time. And so diversity, I like to think about, is really the mix, and inclusion is making the mix work. I think diversity is getting very prominent in a lot of organizations. Folks are understanding that they need to have a mix of candidates on their different interview slates. Within their company, they need diversity. But really, folks grapple with taking the next step in how they can create an inclusive culture.
Yep.
And that's really the bigger step to me, and really what's more important, and something that my organization is grappling with in itself, because it is a difficult thing to do. But it's it's a goal that every organization should have. And so I think that what we're really trying to do here is to really have those advocates within the organization, those leaders within the organization that really help to spread that inclusive, those inclusive behaviors, and so it can permeate through the organization. And so, just to give an example, one of our senior vice presidents, his direct reports, he assigned them a different diversity initiative to focus in on from a talent perspective.
Nice.
And so one of his direct reports he assigned as a disability inclusion champion, one as a woman champion, one as a person of color champion, and so forth. Cool. And I thought that this was really interesting and really, and it's something that isn't established across the whole organization, but I thought that it's something that we can take to the next step to make sure that we do that. And so I thought that doing those type of things, holding people accountable, making sure that it's a part of their goal plan to help increase not only the diversity of the organization, but how are we, bringing women into our, leadership roles? How are we bringing people of color into leadership roles? How, not just getting them in the organization, because our organization is actually over 70% of our organization is composed of women.
Wow.
But when you look at the individual contributor level, and you look at the management and VP director roles, they're not as represented in those roles, those higher up roles than those individual contributor roles. So that's problematic. And so that is more of a question of inclusion. Why are we not growing our people to the levels that they need to be in? And so that is another thing is, how are we moving people up? How are they able to see a model in which they can see themselves grow within the company? We had an organization come on site and they talked about this new talent model that they created where if you're an intern coming into their company, they actually have a map where you can look at and see your level as an intern and see how you can grow all the way to the C-suite level. And just how impactful that is for a person to come into an organization, to see that they can grow, see what they need to do to grow, and to be at that high level it's so great because it works on, a talent retention standpoint. It works on, folks being excited and bringing new ideas and enthusiasm to their work each day. And so it works on the intermediate and also on the future. And I think that that's a really important, paradigm to include.
Well, it's such transparency. I hear that word a lot inside inclusive organizations that we're transparent. Well, what does that mean, right? Mapping out the career path for somebody so that they can
Exactly.
see where it's possible for them to grow. And I would argue from a woman's perspective, that's vital. Because when women look up
Yeah.
and they don't see themselves reflected in the fabric of the organization at those management and senior levels, the indirect message we're sending is you don't belong there. And so by
Exactly.
showing that map, right? And there's different steps you can jump around. There's probably some options there. So you can kind of create your own career path. There's some flexibility, but these are the types of positions that you need to have to get to the top. It reminds me of my early days in my career. I worked at Caterpillar and, very
Hmm.
male dominated construction industry, but we had a pyramid, right? And the bottom levels or these salary grades that did these types of work. There was the next tier that
Hmm.
did this type of work. And then I think there were 5 different tiers before you got to like the VP, C-suite level. And it was fun because I knew operations experience was vital. So I made sure I got that early in my career because the problem is if you advance to a certain level and you don't have that operations experience, which by the way, super male dominated role, you can't go much further. And then you either have to
Hmm.
take a step back or do a developmental role. So it can be a challenge to navigate if you don't have that transparency. And I love what you shared too, Vern, about management and senior level gaps, having 70% women, but it's not 70% at those management and senior levels. Why is that? I especially find organizations that are good at diversity and having that mix, like you said, and then making the mix work with inclusion. I find that they can get women somehow to the top and they get to like a 30% maybe, and that's pretty darn good compared to industry peers. Maybe they even, lo and behold, get to 50%. But then when they look down in the mid management level, there's not a pipeline there of diversity to feed that level. And so it's really
Hmm.
interesting for me that middle manager, that mid career level. I'd love to hear what you're doing to develop that level or tackle that mid management tier because I hear about this a lot as a big problem. And I'm not sure any company has it figured out. But what would you offer to our listeners as strategies to engage diversity at that level?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think one of what I kind of talked a little bit about earlier is incorporating that into leaders' goal plans. I think that's super important. And also, too, another great strategy is to create a diversity and inclusion scorecard as well for your leadership team, and even tie in some of those hiring initiatives, especially around women, to their bonuses. Maybe if they're not capturing or meeting a certain level, maybe 5 to 10% of their bonus is predicated on that.
Yeah.
And you'll be amazed, how, when things are kind of tied to people's direct benefits, how amazed they'll really spur into action. So,
Right. Suddenly they have a
those are,
diverse interview
mhm.
slate.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Exactly. And, I think too, by having a visible kind of talent climb or kind of the pyramid that you mentioned, I think another thing that it does is it really just, um, it really excites people and really, has in the brain maybe even more creative ideas to the organization and
Mm,
gets them more engaged. And so, you'll have people that are, kind of situated and they're here, but are they engaged? And that's
mhm,
really important for an organization, especially when you want to create an inclusionary climate within the organization.
mhm.
So super important to definitely have that element.
Yeah. So leader goal plans, like you said, and do some dividing and conquering as a leader amongst your team. And then the DNI
Hmm.
scorecard and having those career maps for transparency. Those are great takeaways for our listeners today. Yeah, I appreciate the TIDO engagement because a lot of the research is showing, right, a huge correlation between employee engagement and diversity. There's so much data
Hmm.
that supports diverse teams perform better, engaged teams perform better, and yet we still see gaps despite the great body of research out there. And my kind of latest thought on this is that it's just those facts don't inspire change alone. It's the emotion, it's the conversation, it's your personal interest in it. So finding something that people can personally connect with, especially leaders. Why does this matter to you? Yeah, it's a company goal. Yeah, you're held accountable for it. Yeah, you're doing the right things, but like, why? And if you can get
Exactly.
an emotional tie to it, everybody has a diversity story, just as you articulated. And I often find it's an easier leap for men of color to step into this conversation because you've experienced your own discrimination or bias. So I'm constantly having men of diverse backgrounds reach out to me like, I want to be an ally. But white
Hmm.
men, they have something there too. And yeah, they might have daughters or they might have seen their wife have challenges. That's one way. I would argue there's many other ways. And if they can personally connect to why it matters for them, like why they care, there's such a huge commitment to the work that we know that it takes to actually do this tough stuff, to step into these candid conversations about what are the barriers, why isn't it working.
Yeah, I think that's exactly a wonderful thing to do. And we've even approached some of our tech folks using design thinking as a method
Mm,
of not only increasing productivity in the workplace and creating user-centric solutions, but
mm,
also using that as a point of understanding our customers that we serve even better,
yep,
through our own experiences and through their experiences, so that we can really put forth a solution that is inclusionary in itself, to the organization. And so, using
absolutely.
kind of these business function methods that are D&I laden, I think is
Hmm.
really important too.
Yeah, I love that tie to design thinking too. I recently heard, meetings is a big deal. How we conduct meetings is a huge deal, a representation of your
Hmm.
culture, right? And that 1 hour, how people interact and communicate and make decisions. And when you have something like design thinking that naturally gets engagement from everyone on the team, you can't shy away from it. Everyone's voice is going to be heard, especially for women that might be interrupted or not heard or not even be invited to meetings. And then that tie to the customer, right? We get closer to the customer because we're getting all the voices heard in that meeting because we now have techniques and ways that we manage meetings and systems
Hmm.
that make that happen. So excellent tools here. Well, I think our listeners are definitely going to walk away with key things they can do to approach diversity and inclusion from a different perspective, like you said today, Vernon. So thank you for being on. Thanks for being our guest. If our listeners want to reach out to you, what's the best way to follow you, connect with you?
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn, Vernon Johnson MPH. Feel free to connect with me on there. I am also on Twitter, and you can follow me at Phil V, so Thee Vern, V as in Victor, ERN, so Phil V Vern. Uh, Feel free to follow me there for updates from me on different things that we're doing in the D&I space and STEM space as well. So would love to connect. And thank you so much, Julie, for having me.
In the studio, we have Maria Caceres. Maria joined Regions Bank in 2017 and serves as Financial Wellness Relationship Manager. Through Regions Financial Wellness Program, she is responsible for establishing and strengthening business client relationships by helping them increase employee retention and productivity. Creating awareness of the diverse tools and services Regions Banks offer to inclusion and helping to develop a great network of clients, consumers, and bank advocates, promoting financial wellness via seminars and on site presentations to employees at all levels. Prior to joining Regions, Maria worked in the travel medical insurance market as an international business development director. Maria is very active in the Hispanic community in Indiana, for which she advocates for equality, diversity, and inclusion. Maria was born in Venezuela, where she obtained a bachelor degree in journalism and a master's in business administration with a concentration in financial institutions. Maria, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you and being part of this.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Awesome. Well, we've met at a networking event and traded stories about podcasting. And I know we both have an extreme passion for women in business and overall diversity. And I understand you have a candid conversation you have for our listeners that involves a little bit of a lot of different diversity variables. So please do share.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's important to say that I wanted to be part of the podcast live. What you guys do is awesome. And I really like to be able to share my experiences as an international person that came to the States. I came originally to study and then I decided to stay, and it's been a great ride. And I love it. And I think that we can not only do better, but supporting people is important as well. So we came here, we decided to make a live in the U.S., but now what? Now how we can help, right? So hopefully soon I will be able to join you guys as podcasters and have my own one. But
Awesome.
And I'm sure I will invite you to be part of it.
That would be fantastic. And so thinking about what it means to be, an immigrant, I know, which is a passion area for you to help new people to our country to kind of assimilate and the things you wish you'd know. I know that's a focus for you in your work and in your passion area for podcasting. But your own experiences, being, an immigrant to our country, being a Hispanic woman, what is it like, thinking about you've been in corporate America? What has your experience been like with that, Maria?
Well, my experience, I have to say, Julie, has been good. Has been fulfilling, definitely, and but it's also been an eye-opening for me and my family. We are competing in a very difficult market. Because as you can hear, my accent is very strong, and you have to overcome that, which is a language barrier, and then start showing what you can do professionally. And that is what it should be about, right? What are my capabilities? What I can do? How I can deliver? How I can meet my goals and create expectations and overcome that barrier that we have that, I don't speak the language. I'm not from here. My culture is different. But at the end of the day, we have a job to do. And it's how you do it, how you perform, how you create your opportunities, and then you do what you need to do is what should be the conversation. Know how you look, how you dress, or how you speak.
Sure.
It's how you actually do things, right?
Uh-huh. I love that about the qualifications. What is it that I bring to the table? What do I do? Versus a lot of times, especially as women and people that are diverse and sometimes misunderstood. Yeah. What are they wearing? What's their accent like? There's assumptions that are made on your qualifications that could absolutely be completely off the mark. So I'm curious. Yeah. I'm curious. You mentioned the kind of intersectionality of your experience, right? And so for our listeners, what that word means is intersection of different diversity variables. So it could be something, female, different race, different ethnicity, LGBTQ, having different abilities. So the intersectionality of all this diversity and really diversity of thought comes into play, in your background and in your story and the experiences that you have. What does that look like when you have different kind of diversity variables, if you say coming together? What do you see when you have intersectionality?
Well, Julie, I see that in any professional is capable of overcome such of the barriers of not being the same race and gender and sexual orientation, but learning how to work together for the objective, which is a winning, right? So if I see I'm working with another person from another race, and I want to know how they do things so I can improve how I do mine, because if they do it well and I do it well, but mine can benefit them or they can benefit me, I will definitely like to know more. I will see more of what they do and how they do it instead of who it is that is doing it. I don't know if I can explain myself, but it's more of what do you bring to the table professionally? What habits you have? What capabilities you have? And then give them the opportunity to share mine and I share them. And then at the end of the day, we all be winners because we are learning something new and doing what we need to do and the passion that we have, which is, do our jobs.
I love that. Well, it really shows the collaboration, right? A willingness to learn from somebody, like you said. How do you do things? Compare notes. How do I do things? Perhaps it's a learning opportunity for both of us. Chances are we're going to be stronger together when we collaborate and trade skills and knowledge. And so back to that whole common objective of we're in this to win together. And I find, marginalized people that have, diversity in their background, often see the benefits of working with others far more sometimes than people that have more privilege or may not have had to overcome an obstacle, because you realize the benefits of working together and that how important it is for everyone's voices to be heard. So you naturally have an appreciation for wanting to hear other people's voices being heard. So I love that insight, Maria.
Yeah. And let me add something to that, Julie. We have becoming a kind of afraid of asking questions, and I ask a lot of questions because I don't know how. When I came here 25 years ago, I didn't know how things work, right? So I have to ask the question. So that kind of instituted on me that asking questions is okay. So if you don't know, ask the question. Because the answer is what is going to give you the way out to either get out of a situation or do what you need to do or learn more. So asking questions. I have seen many people moving their heads and agreeing to things without even asking a question, how I'm going to do that? How do you do that? So asking a question is very important, especially for us that are new to the market. Let's put it that way.
Well, I love what you shared about that because you honestly didn't know. And that requires some vulnerability to ask questions as a leader that you truly don't know the answers to, right? Because if you know the answer, don't ask it. Or if you think you know the answer, don't ask those questions. But stepping into a vulnerable conversation, a candid conversation, we would argue, requires you to ask questions you don't know the answer to, and it parking that fear, like you said, not being afraid of what the answer might be on the other side.
Yeah, and be ready to do whatever you need to do professionally to, deliver what you need to do and overcome any barriers that they put, ahead of you. And I don't want to stick to gender equality or sexual orientation or either, race. I'm just talking about the common knowledge of things, right? So if I don't know how to do something, it doesn't make it vulnerable to me to ask you questions, right? Julie, how do you do this? How is that? How often you do this so I can also do it? So questions, asking questions, ask the question. That's my recommendation.
Well, I think you show a natural curiosity in those questions. And that engages people, right? As they feel heard, they're naturally going to want to help and support you. So it really bodes well for strengthening that relationship to stay curious. Excellent. Well, Maria, being in the diversity and inclusion space, I'm curious from your vantage point, what we hear often is it can be a bit of a lonely world, right? Driving diversity and inclusion within an organization that may not quite have it figured out, which most organizations don't. What does that look like for you? What do you see as kind of what's working, what's going well? Maybe what are some challenges from a diversity and inclusion perspective?
Well, I have seen companies that I interact with. I don't work with them directly, but I have been interacting with them. That for them, the diversity and inclusion is to have somebody, sitting at their leadership table or part of their board, or hire, people that be part of their workforce. To me, diversity is open your mind and your ideas to accommodate others' ideas and needs. So that, to me, that's what diversity and inclusion is. I need to make sure that I am catering to every single one that thinks different, looks different, and act different to me, but at the end of the day, needs exactly what I'm offering, right? So diversity and inclusion is such a boom right now, but to me, it's just let's work together to satisfy our needs together. It's like living in a big house and making sure that if it's somebody's short, I have enough stools for them to get up, right? And that's to me, that's what diversity and inclusion means. It's just I want to make sure that everybody can participate and can sit at the table and bring their ideas and be satisfied with the answers, right?
Yeah.
That's probably that will be the key to everything, and that will be perfect, a perfect world. But if we work together, we might be close to that perfect world. That's what the diversity and inclusion is.
Yeah, I like that analogy. If we're living in a big house together, we all have separate rooms, but we don't always have the same, we have different needs for different tools. And that's what's often misunderstood by those with privilege that may not need the step ladder, right? They may not realize other people need that, right? I'm tall, so if you're short, I don't even see that. Like, it's really hard for people to unsee their own privilege or to really, back to your point about curiosity, understanding what it's like to be somebody that's different and what they could potentially need, which is why, like you said, you ask a lot of questions. And I offer to our allies out there, simply asking the question, what's it like to be a woman right now? Or what's it like to be a Latino right now?
Yeah.
So the more you get curious about that, the more you open your vantage point, the more you learn. And there may be some easy, simple things that you can do to make life easier for that person inside your organization.
You are asking as the point of view of being a Latino and being a woman, or?
Well, I think you definitely bring a different perspective having that dual perspective. And what I love that you shared, Maria, is that, but it's not about just how you look, right? Like diversity isn't just a gender and race issue. It's not about the intersection of those. It's not about the things we see, right? How we look, but it's also how we think. It's how we behave and act. And so I really like that broader definition of it doesn't mean just because I don't look like you that I'm diverse, but how you think, where you grew up, where you went to school. There's so many other attributes of diversity that we should be expanding this conversation to be. So I'm thinking about that. I love the philosophy about opening your mind and being open to other ideas. What do you think are and knowing that diversity, as you said, is hot right now. It's a hot topic. Everyone's on it, right? What do you see as the biggest challenge to making diversity and inclusion actually happen?
I think that we are afraid to ask the questions, so we don't offend. Right? There's so many cultures that we are seeing, especially now in Indiana, for example, where we live. We see so many cultures coming together. So we don't know what is culturally okay. What question can I ask? How can I do this without offending, them? So I think that we can start by asking the questions. What do you need? What is it that you like? What is it in your country? How do you do this? Would you be okay if we do X? I mean, the question, just address the person and ask them the question, because you said something very important the other day when I attended one of your seminars, is that listen to what they're saying, because maybe in their answer is the answer to your question. And so that's what I do when I go in and sit with a prospective client. I ask the questions and then I listen. I know I have 7 or 8 questions that I need to go to, and the time is valuable, but I ask the question and I listen, because in their answer, it may be answers to other questions, so I don't have to ask those. That's what I say right now, is that let's go to those communities and ask the question, how can I help? What do you need? What can I present to you? How is it in your country? How do you do this in your culture? And then we can have a better understanding of what is it that they need. And then we can make our services so diverse that it will touch every one of those communities.
I love that. I love the questioning, the listening, and the specific questions that you're sharing with our listeners are simple questions to ask, and kind of, again, parking that fear of being afraid of offending somebody. What do you need? What is it like to be you? How can I help? What do you like? What do you not like? And then you end up with a much broader solution that addresses far more needs than it would have before. So for businesses, this is leaving money on the table, right? If you're not addressing all of your customers' needs, or you're marginalizing or speaking to a certain group, you're leaving those out that could also be purchasing your services. So you're right. It's a series of questions. It requires a lot of listening, but realizing you don't have to have the answers, I think, is also kind of freeing. Like, whew, I don't have to know everything.
Yes, exactly. But if they give you, they might give you more than what you need.
Right.
But hey, information is power, right? So the more you know, the more the more you can do for your clients and your associates. We're talking about clients, associates, workforce, your family, your neighbors. We're talking about everyone in your circle.
I love that, Maria. Well, in wrapping up here today, how can our listeners connect and follow you?
Well, as you said, I work for Regions Bank, so I'm very involved in the community. I try to help the Hispanic community to become a powerful voice and have, their needs being heard. Mm-hmm. So I have my LinkedIn profile. They can find me in Maria Caceres. I'm not very big on social media, Julie. I don't have a lot of time. My day goes around visiting my clients, but I'm in LinkedIn if they want to, Maria Caceres, that's my LinkedIn profile. And I work for Regions Bank, so they can always reach out to me.
Okay. Yeah, we'll link to both of those in the show notes. And we certainly appreciate your time today. It has been awesome talking with you, Maria. Thank you for listening to the Pivot Point podcast and our candid conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share it with a friend or subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us at Next Pivot Point on social media and check out our website for free, amazing resources to support your candid conversation journey. It's www.nextpivotpoint.com. Thank you.